I had discussions with previous Reeves about that transition challenge. I think that you mentioned you just or somebody mentioned just a name or a picture on a wall. Well, so I got that, and I didn't feel I wasn't only a public person. I enjoyed that. I love my council work. I mean, I hear the comments about the connectedness, the friendships. It was my social life. My wife said, "How come you don't want to go out?" I know I've been busy. I've been meetings. I've talked all day. I don't want to talk to anybody else. It was a wonderful experience.
While we typically focus on the current issues shaping municipal governance on this show, today we're taking a step back. Today, we want to gain insight from those who have been in the trenches and now find themselves on the other side of public office. In today's episode, we're speaking with 3 former municipal leaders who have dedicated years of serving their communities and have since transitioned into private life. We'll hear from them about their reflections on the challenges, the triumphs, the lessons learned from their time in office, and explore how municipal governance has evolved during their tenure. Our guests today for this roundtable discussion are Ralph Groening, first elected to council in 1995 as a councillor for the Municipality of Morris in Manitoba. Ralph later served as Reeve for the RM from 2010 until his retirement from public office a few years ago. He also served as the president of the Association of Manitoba Municipalities. With decades of experience in municipal leadership, he brings a wealth of knowledge about governance at the rural level. Our second panelist today is Marianne Chiachuk. Acclaimed as White Court, Alberta councillor in 2010, Marianne made history in 2013 by challenging and defeating the incumbent mayor. She successfully defended her position in 2017, earning a second term before stepping away from public service in 2021. And our final guest is Jocelyn Curtaineau. A former Whitehorse Yukon councillor, Jocelyn was first elected in 2012 and served 4 consecutive terms before retiring in 2024. Her experience in northern municipal governance provides a unique perspective on the evolving role of local governance in the Yukon. Now, in our discussion today, we'll explore life after municipal office, what the transition from public to private life looked like, the challenges of stepping away from governance, and whether their passion for municipal affairs keeps them engaged behind the scenes. We will also examine how municipalities have changed over the years in their respective provinces and territories, and what's next for each and every single one of them. And of course, we'll tackle that age-old question: is the grass really greener on the other side of the fence? Now that they're private citizens, is it difficult to resist the pull of municipal politics? Do they find themselves weighing in on local issues, or have they fully embraced a new chapter of life? Now, it's going to be a fascinating conversation, so without further ado, this is Municipal Affairs. Across Canada, our cities, towns, villages, and rural communities are alive with stories waiting to be told. Stories of innovation and economic development, resilience in the face of the housing challenges, and the financial hurdles municipalities overcome every day. At the Cross Border Network, we bring these stories to life. From coast to coast to coast, we're connecting Canadians to the issues shaping our communities and showcasing the people working tirelessly to make them thrive. With your support, we can expand our reach, amplify more voices, and shine a light on the challenges and triumphs of municipal life. For as little as $3.99 a month, you can help us grow and continue sharing the stories that matter most. Join us today and be part of this important mission. Together, we can tell more stories, build stronger communities, and make a real difference. Support the Cross Border Network now. Visit www.crossborderinterviews.ca today. Ladies and gentlemen, I guess I can't call you Mayor Councillor Reeve right now, so I'm going to say, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for participating in this roundtable discussion about the transition from public life to private life. All three of you have served your communities, served your provinces, served your territories with honor and distinguish. And I'm so honored to have you here to talk about that transition from public life to private life and your time in municipal office in your respective provinces and territories. Before we get started into the abundance of questions I have for this transition roundtable, I want to start with a brief 30-second introduction for all of you, so that way my listeners get to know who you are. So starting with Marianne, can you introduce yourself? Tell us why you got in municipal politics and the time you served.
Thank you, Chris. My name is Marianne Chichak, and I got involved in municipal politics back in 2010 and served for 11 years, 1 year as a councillor or 1 term as a councillor and 2 terms as mayor. I always had a fascination for politics, enjoyed it way back into my early teens. I had a brother who was a councillor, and my late husband was a councillor as well. So very motivated and was something I always wanted to do. So took the jump in 2010 and had no regrets.
Awesome. Ralph, yourself, quick introduction.
Certainly, yes. I was elected as a councillor for the RM, the Rural Municipality of Morris, 1995. I was a part of a group that I learned to fear later on. We were an ad hoc group. We had a single issue. We didn't know anything. We were 7 of us. We had one slate of candidates. We were all elected, brand new people. It scared the CAO. We had a great time. I was the councillor for 15 years, and I was at Reeve for 12 years. Also served on the AMM board of directors for 14 years. 6 as vice president, 2 as president. Loved that part of my work. I was on the FCM board for 3 years as well. So it's been a great experience. Learned lots, and look forward to the discussion.
And Jocelyn, a quick introduction for yourself.
Yes, hi, Jocelyn Curtanu. I was elected as a city councillor for the city of Whitehorse, Yukon, in 2012. That was the first time I'd ever entered politics. The reason I wanted to get into politics was because at the time the demographics of the city of Whitehorse was changing very quickly. We were getting a lot of immigrants in, and I felt that that voice needed to be represented on council, and we did not have that kind of representation. So I just felt that it was something that I could do for my community. I've always been active in the community, doing volunteer work with different organizations and associations. And I have been working for the federal government for 28 years. So I guess public service is just in my blood.
Awesome. And I appreciate all three of you for sitting down and doing this. And I got to start with a very simple opening question. And we're going to start with Ralph on this one, if you don't mind. The moment you realize that life in politics is over and it's time to adjust to go to that private life is a very eye-opening experience. I've chatted with many former politicians who say there was that moment when they realized the time in governance was done. What was that moment for you, Ralph, when you said, I think I've done as much as I can do to help my community move forward?
Well, that decision, it wasn't a one moment type of this is what I have to do. I had discussions with the CAO and council. We had certain policies that we want to put in place. We did what we could to put those into action, and I slowly began to realize, and I was encouraged as well by my partner, that an additional 4-year commitment, big commitment, it wasn't in the cards, and I agreed with her, and so I slowly moved into that decision announced to council, and really the moment that it really hit me was when I was cleaning out my office and putting things away, and this is it. I'm walking out of here, and this is it. So that moment stayed with me, but otherwise that's kind of the process. That's how it happened.
Jocelyn, for yourself, was there a moment, because you're the newest member of the former politician club on this round table, as you just resigned late last year in 2024. So was there a moment, because you announced quite early on in 2024 that you were not going to be seeking another term, if I'm not mistaken, from the news reports that I read. So what was that moment for you when you said, okay, Four terms is enough for Jocelyn.
I don't think actually 4 terms was enough for me, but it was just a culmination of of personal
Okay.
circumstances. Yeah, it was a culmination of personal circumstances that brought me to the point where I needed to prioritize and decided to prioritize my family over politics. But this in 2024 was, I mean, I finished out. I think I realized that sort of midterm, but I finished my term out because I made a commitment to the people of Whitehorse and I was going to stick to it. But at the end of it, there was a bit of relief for sure. There was a bit of sort of reorganizing my life. And then I think I'm still kind of digesting it all. I just feel all of a sudden my world that was so wide and vast is now shrunk into this small thing. I work from home in my remote office, like I don't see anybody anymore and I miss it. And that's why I'm just saying it may not be a permanent situation, but the next election is another 4 years away anyway. So I've got some time to regroup and reconsider and see how I can see what my life is going to hold in the near future.
Marianne, for yourself, 1 term as councillor, 2 terms as mayor. And I should note, you're kind of a rarity because in your first term as mayor, you defeat an incumbent mayor and you get successfully reelected in 2017. And then in 2021, you decide 2 terms as mayor is enough. And what was the decision based on leaving in 2021?
So my decision actually was made a little bit earlier than that. And when I got involved in politics, Chris, absolutely loved it. It was still, I will say, the best gig of my life. Got involved and loved my busy life. I sat on the Alberta Municipalities Board for many years on both the business side, the advocacy side. Did 1 year on FCM, never missed a community event. Was there from sunrise to sundown, serving the community, and absolutely loved it. And then we had COVID that came along. And I will say COVID taught me work-life balance when we started working from home. And I realized that there maybe was more to life than just politics. A good friend told me at one point in time, you're just a name on the wall and a face on the wall when you leave and nobody really cares. And I enjoyed the transition. I announced a year before the election that I wouldn't be running. It was kind of that decision. So I had a year to digest it.
Okay, so with that out of the way, now the actual meat and potatoes of this interview gets underway. There is an adjustment that each and every single one of you that had to go through when leaving public office. Ralph, you talk about packing up your office and walking out that door, and it really hit you then. But what has been the biggest adjustment? And we'll start with Jocelyn on this one. What was the biggest adjustment that you had to undertake and you had to get your head around? Because I can imagine being in it 24/7, even though it's not a full-time job, you are in it 24/7. And then the day after the election, you literally hand in your keys to the office and say, I guess I'm just a private citizen now. What's that transition like up in the Yukon?
Started to feel like a nobody, actually. Now, when there's the photo ops, I'm like, are you going to get in the picture? Nah, I'm nobody now. It doesn't matter. But no, the things I missed, there's been a few. There's been a few big adjustments. One is, of course, as I mentioned, my world has shrunk considerably. I'm so used to being around a lot of people. I miss being in the know. I miss all those invitations to events and meetings that helped keep me informed about what was going on in the community. I feel like I'm not learning as much, like working in politics, it helps you to grow so much, and develop as a person in so many ways. And like you learn so much about a wide range of topics and it pushes you out of your comfort zones, right? And you're trying new things. And I think it also helps to increase your understanding of the world around you and forces you to think outside the box. So beyond your own perceptions of, or perspective of what's going on. So I think that's a big thing that I'm missing, and I'm looking for that in other ways. And I find myself just trying to readjust to a much slower pace, because I'm so used to that fast, more almost adrenaline fueled pace all the time. And now everything seems like it's moving in slow motion. So I don't particularly like that. And but you know, the nice thing is I do have more time to focus on my kids and my home. And I find that I'm doing a lot more cleaning, almost to the point of like people might say it's OCD, you know. And I'm also paying a lot more attention to what my kids are doing, which, you know, my youngest was only 5 when I started in politics. So they've grown to be quite independent. And now that I'm like helicopter parenting sometimes, I don't think that's much appreciated. But I'm sure they do appreciate that I'm there now whenever they need me, you know, at a moment's call, I'm there. So there's good and bad, but definitely a lot of adjustment.
Marianne, for yourself, I can imagine that transition, because I know Whitecourt was going through a big transition, and there's always growth going on in Whitecourt, from going from 12 years, almost 12 years, 11 years, I believe, because I think there was that 3-year term in Alberta where you were first elected, and then going completely nonchalant to just being Marianne again. Like that, I can imagine that transition in Whitecourt was pretty eye-opening.
It was a bit of a change, Chris, for sure. I had, excuse me, a lot of support from both family and friends. My children were 14, 15 when I got involved in politics. So they had a few challenges with being in a small town and having their mother being the mayor and being interrupted at family dinners and that. So they were very supportive of me exiting the political scene. I had a bit of a different transition in the fact that I took a part-time job in government relations, which allowed me to make that soft transition from being busy to working part-time hours as I saw fit in the different industries that I wanted to work to or through. So I've been able to learn a lot since I left politics and still stay connected with my municipal friends, which I've absolutely loved.
For Ralph, and this is a weird question, and you might all want to answer this question, but Ralph, being elected in 1995, leaving in 2022, I'm doing my basic math here. That's almost 27 years in public office, where people know who you are by the end of those 27 years. I would hope people know who you are after 27 years in public office. You leave, people probably still think that you're mayor, Reeve, councillor, even after you've left. Was that transition from a public perspective where people knew you as the guy who was the Reeve of the RM and now you're not? Was it hard to transition to say, I don't know, go ask the actual Reeve because it's not my issue anymore?
Well, I was, you know, I had discussions with Reeves, previous Reeves, about that transition challenge. I think that you mentioned you just or somebody mentioned just a name or a picture on a wall. Well, so I got that, and I didn't feel, I wasn't only a public person. I enjoyed that. I loved my council work. I mean, I hear the comments about the connectedness, the friendships. It was my social life. My wife said, "How come you don't want to go out?" I know I've been busy. I've been at meetings. I've talked all day. I don't want to talk to anybody else. It was a wonderful experience, but it's important, and I always reminded myself that I am more than the mayor or the president of AMM or vice president. I am my own person. I'm a father to my children. I'm a husband to my wife, and I focused on that. Doesn't mean though that there's no little bit of work that goes into the recreation, because really it's a retirement and it's another phase in your life, and that's been more of a challenge. Like, not that I'm not a Reeve. I don't care about that. I love being connected, but I don't care about that. But who is Ralph now? Like, what am I? Where's my relevance? What do I want to do with whatever time I have? And I'm working on that. But that's a challenge.
So that's a good question that I want to pose to all of you. Did you learn who you were after leaving public office than when you were in public office? Because when you're in public office, you are councillor, you're mayor, you're Reeve, and that's who your persona is. And that's your persona for the entire time you're in office. But the moment you leave, you drop the formalities. You're no longer Reeve, you're no longer councillor, you're no longer mayor, and you're just the regular citizen who sends their emails to their Reeve, to their mayor, to their councillor, like you got probably in your time in office. Is it hard to find who you are after being so public about who you are for so long? And then once you realize you are just a photo on a wall, and 20 years from now, people are just going to say, oh, who was that mayor? Who was that Reeve? Who was that councillor? And your time is just going to be known as that picture on the wall. Is that an eye-opening experience? Ralph, do you want to actually, Marianne, let's start with you on that one.
Absolutely. So I will say when I first thought about retiring from politics, I talked to my son about it, and he said, what the heck are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. I will read for fun. I don't have to read political agendas anymore. And he said, Mom, you need to find more than that in life. You need to find hobbies. You need to discover and figure out who you are, because you have no idea. You have worked 18 hours a day for 11 years. You need to find things to do. And it took me a while, Chris, but it's getting into an exercise routine and healthier eating. It's looking at how I can improve my own health. Gotten involved in pickleball, golf, back to downhill skiing. Like, I have found those hobbies and rediscovered that there's a lot of things to do, including travel. Done many trips, but it took me that year after I talked to my son to think about, he's right, what the heck am I going to do if I retire from politics? Life is politics to me. But once I got thinking about it, I have never looked back from it. It's been a great transition and a great journey in both politics and transitioning out of that.
Now knowing what you know now, Jocelyn, you talk about that small world that you live in and that sort of work from home attitude that you are currently in. Would you have retired in 2024 if you knew now what you know now then? If you knew then what you know now of being so isolated in the world and not in the daily grind of municipal politics?
Yeah, I think because my decision to leave politics for now was driven by external factors. It wasn't driven by something I wanted to do, but something that I needed to do to be able to prioritize others before the politics. And when you're in politics, it's all consuming, and that you just can't do that. So I needed to make sure that that my family that they're okay and stuff like that. So that there's no competition there. Like, I definitely prioritized my family, and so I left. Always in the back of my mind, though, thinking that once I get things back in order, and I can always think about it, like I have 4 years to think if I want to go back into that into the scene. But I've also been very careful not to lose my identity in the role, because I find that with a lot of politicians, yeah, the role does become their identity, and so outside of it, they're lost and they're floundering, and they may end up making some bad decisions as a result because they're missing sort of that feeling of importance, perhaps. But for myself, I think it wasn't so much about losing myself. I think I've always known who I was. I've always been somebody who wants to help others. And that's why I've been working for the federal public service for so long, and I continue to do so. So like I said, it's in my blood. That's my passion, is to help. What I think I needed to refocus on is what I want, not who I am, but what I want. And in, working in politics, you're always trying to make everybody else happy. So trying to meet everybody else's needs. So now I'm sitting back, taking this time and thinking, okay, well, I like to help people, but what do I want for myself? And make sure that I also have a balance in my life for that. And yeah, so it's about reorganizing, replanning, perhaps like I guess just really wanting to know where I see myself in the next little while and where I want to be in the next little while. But I have time now, so so I'm a little bit relieved.
Ralph, you started this line of questioning, so I'm going to end on you before I ask one last question in this segment. Then I turn to another segment. But do you know who Ralph is? You say you don't really know who he is because you have been Reeve, you have been councillor for so long. Do you know who Ralph is after politics?
Yes. Um, I didn't really struggle with that. I have a pretty good sense of myself. I'm a shy introvert person, and so I had to play. I had to recreate myself, and you can do it. And I learned to be social, and I am a social and sociable. So it was fine. I'm very comfortable with myself. Not a problem at all. Being Reeve or vice president or any of those different positions, you know, hey, I'm not an eagle like anybody else. I was happy to be there and to have that role and to serve the people. That's what it's all about, like serving the community. Talking about 18-hour days. Yeah, I lived it. But no, I was fine with myself. I still am fine with myself. You just have to find, like, what do I want to do now? I mean, I work out, I run every day. I have a clarinet. I'm a basement musician. I do stuff like that. That was my plan. That was that to people. Retirement, you should have at least two hobbies. I have two or three or maybe four hobbies, so I'm good. Life goes on, but to make those non-council meeting activities and events, to make them as significant as council work, that takes some time working on it.
Awesome. So my last question in this segment, and it's an open discussion. If anyone wants to take this to start off with, it's a double-edged question. You have all made some very tough decisions, and you all had to make some very tough decisions in your time in office. We often find ourselves always looking back on what we could have done better, what we could have done a little bit differently in the role of councillor, mayor, or Reeve. Is there things in your past, in your political life, where you say, I wish I would have gone a different route in that vote? I wish I would have fought a little bit harder on this infrastructure challenge. Is there things that keep you up, or is your time in office in the rearview mirror and you go, I did the best I could under the circumstances and with the knowledge that we had at the time? Because you always try to improve your community, but and I'm not preaching to any choir here, but you can't always make the best decisions because there's not going to be 100% of the people who are going to be behind you, and there's always going to be people upset with you. Looking back in your time in office, is there anything you would have done differently, or are you content with how your time in office wrapped up? Who wants to take that one first? Marianne, go
I'll
ahead.
start off first. So on that one, as mayor and as a councillor, always thought we did a good job. We listened, we advocated well. And it wasn't until I left politics and came onto the other side that I got a chance to reflect back and look at it and go, gosh, we could have done so many things differently and lobbied and done advocacy differently. I don't know how Jocelyn and Ralph did it, but for us, we always looked at advocacy. And when we had an infrastructure project, we always started with the minister. And that was, I reflect back now and think, I wish we would have looked to see where within the bureaucracy do we start, because there were some meetings with ministers. We would walk out of it and I'd go, oh my gosh, I don't think I spoke English or I articulated myself very well, because that was like deer in the headlights when I was talking about this really important project and why it's important not only to our community, but to the region. So when I look back, there were tough decisions for sure and issues that arose, but I wish on the advocacy side of it, I think we could have advanced some projects a lot further if we would have done things a little bit differently.
Jocelyn, for yourself?
I mean, I tend to agree with what you were saying earlier. Like, you can only do the best that you can do with the information you have available to you and sort of the environment that you are made to work in, And I think we did our best. And I'm actually quite proud where our city is right now. And I know it wouldn't be at the place it is if it wasn't for the hard work of all the previous councils before. So I know that those decisions, whether at the time they were popular or unpopular, they were made to get us to where we are today. And I honestly am quite proud of where we are today. So I don't think I would necessarily want to go back and change anything.
Perfect. Ralph, a little final word in this segment to you, and then we're going to talk about municipal governance and how it's evolved.
Happy to talk about this because I mentioned we came into council in 1995, took over the responsibility, 7 new people. We accomplished many things, and I have no regrets. I answered phone calls, I answered texts, I responded to people. I worked every day. I was committed to the job, and I really can't say that we missed much. We put in sewer and water. We built industrial parks. The previous Reeve and myself worked in the community for 27 years. Actually, I'm going to have lunch with him tomorrow. He's a great guy. We had a team. We made things happen. We really did. We did our own water line. We as a municipality, we were unique. We're very unique. I'm proud of what we did, and I have no regrets. I gave my job every effort that I could, and we accomplished something. I know we made mistakes. We all do as politicians. One thing I learned early on, not everybody likes you. As a matter of fact, you can be pretty guaranteed that there's a few people that do not at all appreciate your efforts. You have to get over that. I think I did with the support of good councils, great staff. It's a team. It's a team. Staff, CAO, and council. No regrets. Loved it, and life goes on.
I love that. I love that optimistic that all three of you that you just shared there. I want to talk about the evolution of municipal governance. Now, as some of you may know, I have chatted with many municipal leaders across Canada. And the one thing I often hear is there is a very bad apathetic nature in municipal governance. People aren't showing up to council meetings as they once did. People do not understand the jurisdictional role that the province, the territorial, the federal government, the municipal government play in their day-to-day life. But when shit hits the fan, pardon my French, everyone, municipalities are the ones who deal with all the stuff because you are the closest to the people. In your time in office, what has been the biggest, or during your time in office, I should say, what was the biggest change that you saw from a municipal level that you were not dealing with when you first got elected to what you were dealing with when you retired, that you said, we shouldn't be dealing with this. This is a territorial, this is a provincial, this is a federal issue? Or was the apathy that changed in your cities, your respective provinces and territories changing? So we'll start with Jocelyn there. What was the biggest change that you saw in your tenure?
That's a loaded question.
That's why I said this is segment 2. This is the political part of the show now.
Well, when I first got on council, almost all of us were pretty new. I think there may have been only 2 incumbents in there. So we, for the most part, we did our orientation and everything. But we were more focused, I think, on sort of the mandates of the city, right? So these are our core responsibilities. These are the things we need to focus our resources and our capacity on. And so there wasn't a lot of argument with that. I know one of the biggest criticisms from the public was that, council just did what administration wanted them to do. They didn't really have a say or a voice, or they were easily, I guess they were saying, in a municipality joke kind of way, administration was driving the bus, right? I mean, so
I've heard that numerous times.
So that's kind of how it was. By the end of my tenure, just in the last term particularly, we've gotten a lot more engagement from youth. So we had more diversity on council. And of course, as the councillors become more diverse, so do the interests and their values and all that, which is a strength. Don't get me wrong, it's a strength. But I think because also a lot of them were pretty new, there was a little bit of prioritizing that was kind of, let's say, I'm trying to say this in a way that doesn't offend anybody, but the value, because there was limited understanding of what we were really mandated to do versus what many wanted to do. There's a lot of things going on around the world, right? Like there's no doubt. There's the war in Ukraine, for example, right? So back in 2012, probably we wouldn't have had much to say about that war, except yes, we're supportive. But here we are having now, fast forward 2024, we were having events and demonstrations in front of City Hall in which we participated to support Ukraine, right? Which really isn't in the municipal jurisdiction in terms of responsibility. That's more federal, territorial, but more federal, right? So I found that our resources were getting a lot more stretched out because of these new things coming our way that our citizens really wanted us to participate in, engage in, support, have a say in, maybe even encourage, we have like a sister city relationship now with Ukraine, right? As a result. So that is something that is specifically municipal that we have now extended to help send a message internationally about our commitment to supporting Ukraine. So there's that difference, and I think that wears on the very limited capacity and resources that a municipality has, especially in the north, because at least in the south, sometimes you can have your own police force. We don't have that as a municipality. We have the RCMP, which they're good too, but so we don't have as much authority or financial backing or budget to support these sort of larger initiatives, I guess. So this is a big change that I've seen, depending on who was elected. And it's great that there is that diversity. And maybe it is time that we started to expand our mandate when it comes to municipalities, right? But of course, with change, there's always a bit of like a transition period that happens. That's painful.
Certainly is. Ralph, for yourself, what was the biggest change that you saw in your almost 27 years in public life? Because I mention all the time that in the 90s, it'd be hard pressed not to see people at the council table, council room, watching those council meetings, reading those agenda packages. But in 2024, I would be very hard pressed to say that there's probably a handful of people who show up on a regular basis to council meetings anymore, even if one or two people show up. So for you, what did you see that was the biggest, whoa, this has changed and we've got to rectify it moment?
Well, 27 years, that's a chunk of time in a person's life. We came on council, and fortunately we were a cooperative group. We sure appreciate the comment made about who's driving the bus. Kind of CEO council relationship is really, really important. And I work for and with and sometimes against 4 different CAOs. But that's an essential relationship. Municipal work is so important, and I'm passionate about that responsibility, that third, fourth level of government that does not get the respect that they deserve. They are, as you mentioned, we are, and we're there with the people. When you were at the post office, the grocery store, the church, wherever you are, a hockey rink, curling rink, you're wrong. People would say, well, I really shouldn't ask you this, but I will. That kind of thing. Changes. We came on council. We're old style. It was an old style council. There was no public works foreman in place. We made changes happen. We saw changes happen. We realized very quickly that there was a funding challenge, which I will conclude with because that's certainly true. The foreman was hired. We began to get involved in a cooperative way to build a better community. Council was on board with that. We went paperless about 15 years ago. That was, oh gosh, how do you do it? So that was a big, big change. We just learned to operate more effectively. We learned, and it helped that I was a part of the municipal organization of Manitoba. We learned how to lobby more effectively, dealt, like the flood of 1997, just, worked 62 days consecutive. There was no emergency coordinator. What's that? with the vendor, we hired one. So many changes that took place. I would conclude by saying this: that we discovered about halfway through my time on council that there isn't an adequate funding model. We could and should talk about that. We're tasked to do so much more infrastructure than we used to, sewer and water, doing those kinds of projects. Which, when I first came on, that was, well, we're not going to put in water lines. No, now you do water lines with challenges with public safety, policing. Public safety is a big issue. That's a major issue. Firefighters, we're operating with volunteer firefighters. Where do you continue to find those people? Where do you find the money to purchase $750,000 fire trucks for smoke? So, and the police are RCMP police is our area, but they're overworked. There's not enough of them. We have challenges. There's talk about a Manitoba police force. So many different changes. I think I've touched on some of them. The main challenge, though, was a transfer of responsibilities, whether it's roads, bridges, or public safety, transfer of the public health. So the responsibility is shifted to municipalities. That is a big change, and there aren't the resources to manage that. That is the big challenge.
I want to follow up on that in 2 seconds, but I just want to get Marianne on that question. What was the biggest change that you saw in your time in office?
So in 2010, when I came in on council, social media was becoming a thing for engagement, but it really wasn't there. It was just starting to catch on with Facebook. And from there, we went to Twitter, which is now X, to Instagram. So the unfortunate part that I found in the transition is the keyboard warriors that wanted to complain. They didn't have the gumption or the guts to come and pick up the phone and call you, or to come into your office to see you, but they sure had a lot of time to trash you on social media. They were the ones that would complain about snow removal in the community, but when you gave them the opportunity at budget time to go on to a program that would say, I want more money spent on snow removal, and this is how it would affect the municipal portion of your taxes, they had no interest in doing that. So when you talk about engagement, we struggled with public engagement. We would have food and coffee for our budget meetings, and we might get 20, 30 people for a community of 10,000 people. When we went live due to COVID, our live stream meetings maybe had 20 people, and that would include staff, which is actually pretty sad engagement. But the citizens' expectations versus reality, there was no comparing it. They had no idea sometimes what was our municipal responsibility. They would complain about a new pizza place opening up that they felt that was us doing it, where we should be spending money on schools and hospitals. That's not our mandate. We're there to approve and encourage economic development. Another thing that I really saw that really saddened me over my term as mayor is the urban-rural divide, where we had a really good relationship with our county, and we're one of the first ones in the province to come up with a cost-sharing agreement that in my last term went for naught, that ended up going through mediation while I was mayor, went to arbitration, and finally just got settled a year ago. So it was a big thing that affected both municipalities, and not in a positive way for moving forward, for economic development, for investment. And it took a lot of time and effort and money away from where the municipality should have been focusing on. So I would say lots of changes from the start to the end, some positive, some not so positive.
Okay. We talk about the political questions. I'm going to start with Ralph on this one, because he opened the sandbox and Pandora's box, and I'm going to play in that box for a few seconds. COVID-19. Gotta rip the Band-Aid off right now. It changed the name of the game when it came to municipalities here in Alberta, in Saskatchewan, and British Columbia. I'm not sure about the Yukon, and Jocelyn, you'll be able to talk about that a little bit more in depth because you're the resident expert on Yukon municipalities. But COVID-19 changed the name of the game of what municipalities were dealing with. Ralph, prior to COVID-19, prior to the pandemic, did you see less partisanship and more community in the day-to-day operations of the municipality? And since COVID-19, did you see a changing of attitude where more people were willing to be those keyboard warriors and talk about partisan politics when municipalities, about 98% of them, do not have partisan politics there? But, oh, you're a liberal hack, you're a conservative wannabe, you're an NDP, whatever you want to call it. Did you see a rise in that partisanship after COVID-19 than before COVID-19?
I don't believe that COVID contributed to that transition. We're talking about the impact of social media. I would say for us, we COVID-19 wasn't the defining factor in how we were able to govern and the effectiveness of our governance. No, I don't think it was. Communication was important. Now, what we did, we worked with a local internet coordinator, brought high-speed internet to about 65% of our communities, and that allowed us to maintain contact with people. We had public meetings, or we had our meetings that weren't public. You couldn't do anything. So we put them on YouTube. Occasionally, you'd have people that wanted to come on board. We were learning. People would join us and use inappropriate language. We didn't yet have the expertise to know how you can properly guide that process. So we did have those people that chose to be contrary. COVID itself was a huge challenge for council and for us as a community leadership group to maintain contact with our people. I dislike it.
You don't see that the municipality governance style changed after COVID-19, or
no?
Okay.
I would say not. Other than if before COVID there was a reluctance to participate in governing communities. It certainly seemed more of a challenge at the last election. They had two council people had to be appointed. So whether that was a COVID consequence, I'm not certain that it necessarily was. Didn't like COVID. It affected us big time. Now, during COVID, I was president of AMM. I was like, maybe I wasn't aware of everything that was happening, because
I'm assuming Larry Johansson probably called you a few times, the mayor of Selkirk, and told you a few things. Not throwing you under the bus, Larry.
During COVID, we had a lot of opportunity to connect with and to understand and appreciate the challenges all over Manitoba. Yeah. We didn't have the same kind of challenge that other communities did.
I appreciate it. Jocelyn, for yourself in the Yukon territories, was life before COVID different municipally than life after COVID? And I should say life after COVID as in like we're still dealing with it, but we're not in the major pandemic that we were in.
Yeah, life has changed. I don't think in terms of even the political environment or just the environment in general, our society, I don't think they became more divisive as a result of COVID. I think there were certain actors on the international stage that used COVID as a tool to promote more divisiveness, to promote their own agenda. And as a result, you saw the effects of that. And COVID was their excuse, right? And it was really, I don't know, it's pretty low to do something like that when people are struggling and just people are dying, and then to use that to promote yourself, your agenda, and to try to create divisiveness in not just your own community, but the international community, I think it's beyond what I can even imagine anybody would want to do. But I think that's what happened there. And and then once people started talking more freely, because I was told by a mayor one time that citizens act like their leaders. And so when some leaders started to behave in these ways, I think it just encouraged those who have been hiding under rocks because they've been always told that that kind of behavior and conduct is inappropriate, all of a sudden became brave and bold, because now they know it's not just them. It's there are others out there in leadership positions that support what they've been thinking all along. So I think it was pivotal that way, COVID. But the good things that came out of COVID municipally, and I'm sure in many governments, is the fact that I think it's encouraged a lot more engagement, because it made us look for more innovative ways to engage with the public. And so it accelerated the adoption of virtual meetings and remote engagement, so that now if a mother, for example, was at home trying to tend to her kids, but had something really important to say to council, she can attend the meeting via telephone. I know at City Hall, we worked really hard to improve our virtual engagement. So we invested in better equipment for our council chambers, because we're like televised all the time, and then we have like people calling in. Now, I believe as I left, we changed that system over, so now people can actually appear like a Zoom meeting and attend meetings that way. I think I haven't actually been at one yet since, but I believe that was the direction we were going. And so I think in that way, there's a lot more engagement now, because now people their values are being threatened, right? The world that they believed that we lived in is no longer reality for them. And so I think that's put a lot of people up in arms, but at the same time, it's really made us all sort of become more accountable for our society and for each other.
Marianne, last word to you before my final question in this segment. Off to you.
Thank you. So I think the one thing we found during COVID as a municipality is communication was paramount, and daily communications going out to the residents regarding COVID, trying to keep that little bit of calm. And I think a lot of communities across Canada saw divisiveness come out on those that would get vaccinated versus those that didn't. It caused division amongst friends, amongst families, masking versus non-masking. There would be some establishments that didn't want to follow the rules. So for us, it was the communication piece. The place I think we struggled the most is all of us on council were the face-to-face people, where we could gauge the body language. We could actually kind of really get a better feeling how a councillor was feeling, perhaps have a better read on presentations that were being made. It's really hard to do that over video. It's difficult. You just can't read the room the same way when you're chairing a meeting. It's a little bit more difficult to do that as well. But you adapted, and I think people have adapted to that over time. But it definitely it was a period of learning for all of us. It was a time where we learned we could work from home and work effectively from home. Maybe not as well as in person, but we went through that transition. We had our staff work from home, but actually as soon as we could, we did bring them back in the office for that face-to-face connection.
Okay. So you were all respected leaders in your own provinces and territories. Well, formerly respected, but still respected you know what I'm trying to say here, but not trying to say it incorrectly here. You guys are all respected in the fields because you all have been part of councils, and you know the day-to-day wants and needs of your communities quite well. And I can imagine they probably have changed a little bit since you have left, a few months, few years for the other two. What do you see as the biggest challenge facing municipalities today? Because you were in the belly of the beast. You were in the lion's den. You were there fighting for your communities day in and day out. And there's things that you probably wish you could have got done, wish you could have moved a little bit further on, but municipalities are still dealing with them today. For your respective cities, RMs, for your respective territories, provinces, what do you see as the biggest challenge facing municipalities in your respective areas? We'll start with Jocelyn on this one.
Yeah, I think the challenge hasn't changed. It's just bigger than it was before, and that is trying to meet the needs of a growing community, a rapidly growing community, their needs, their expectations, and their demands with very limited resources, both financial and staff. And I don't think that the funding that we get, I mean, we get funding through like taxes and fines and things like that, fees. But we also rely quite heavily on the territorial and the federal government for government transfers. They haven't increased as quickly as the needs of our community have. And it just seems the gap keeps getting wider and wider with climate change, infrastructure challenges, with, of course, all the costs post-COVID now, with costs have all gone up. And then on top of that, now with costs even going up further with all the other geopolitical stuff going on, it just that the gap just keeps getting wider, and the demands that we need to meet keep becoming even more and more diverse as our communities grow, and as their awareness is raised as to what, like, the expectations, right? We just have a small population base, and our population base is growing really quickly, but we can't all of a sudden put a huge tax rate increase to our citizens. They're struggling, if harder than everybody, like than many of us, right? Like the governments, at least they have fairly deep wallets, but when you're talking about the average citizen, they're struggling really, like it's very, very difficult with everything going on. And then of course we're still trying, I mean, never mind enhancing our services, we're just trying to maintain them, and we can't. And it's just, there's all so much pressure on the municipal government, and municipal governments, I find, are like, they're undervalued and they're underappreciated, until something seriously goes wrong, and then all of a sudden everybody's fingers are pointing at the municipality. Like, hello, we've been telling you we're going to be having issues. We've been telling you we need more money for infrastructure. Our infrastructure is going to fail. We've been telling you that climate change is accelerating, particularly in the north. The impacts of climate change is accelerated in the north, and now you're talking about, northern sovereignty. How the heck are we supposed to try to do that if we can't barely keep the lights on? So it's that kind of stuff. It's just that gap just keeps getting wider and wider, and something really needs to be done if we're going to be able to be self-sufficient as a nation, which, as we know, the theme is right now, is that's what we need to do. And we need to ensure that all our borders are protected, and a good portion of that is in the north. So we need help. We need help, and we need the other levels of government to take action, not tomorrow. We need them to take action yesterday.
Okay, Marianne, I'm assuming you're going to say the exact same thing, that funding is probably a priority. You might add something on to that. And if you do, great. But I want to just follow up on what Jocelyn said with a question that is in the same lines of the funding. And Jocelyn, if you want to answer it right afterwards, go right ahead. There's only one taxpayer, though. Funding is great. Funding is awesome. There's only one taxpayer. And municipalities, the province, the federal government all get their money from the exact same person. That's me, you, everyone sitting around this table, anyone who's listening to this. And I'm sorry, but municipalities have not been funded properly, and they're probably not going to be funded properly over the next few years because people are struggling. We have a huge debt, and people are trying to go day by day, week by week to get by. How do municipalities deal with that challenge, knowing that there's only one taxpayer and we can't continuously go back to the pool and ask for the taxpayer to pay more to offset these challenges that municipalities are dealing with? Marianne?
So very good points you brought up, Chris, but one of the things you haven't touched on that's come in 2025 is the incoming tariffs that also will impact municipalities in many different ways, depending on where that goes and how far it goes and how long it goes for. So that in itself poses a challenge. For municipalities, funding is paramount. You're right, there's only one taxpayer. And it's taking a look, municipalities have the majority of the infrastructure within their own boundaries, but only probably 20 cents of every, or 20 cents of every tax dollar goes to them to manage, maintain, and build, which is really
Just on that
frustrating.
note, I wanted to introduce you to some people out in Prince Edward Island because that number is 9 cents on every dollar. There's my little plug for Prince Edward Island. So they don't even get that much.
Well, and you know what? Maybe it is just 10 cents on the dollar now, but it's frustrating, and it's frustrating for an elected politician to take a look at the province coming and saying, we're going to download services to you, and we're going to fund it 80-20, and we're going to increase funding based on population growth plus inflation. But then 9 years later, it's not an 80-20 funding, it's the reverse. That's like 20% provincial and 80%. That all comes at the cost of our own residents. We have provinces, and I'm sure the territory is the same way, the educational portion. You might plan for a budget increase, and then you'll find out provincially the educational portion is increasing. And I know in our municipality, we would take a look at it to see where could we claw back that we didn't turn the increase back over to our residents, that we could find ways to mitigate that increase. So a lot of times it's municipalities taking a look at their maintenance programs, their infrastructure programs, and realigning exactly where those new buildings are going to come in, those upgrades are going to come in to serve the citizens, because you can only increase taxes so much. There's a threshold, and you've got to be really careful when you walk that line.
Ralph, you raised your finger a few times, and I'm
Well,
assuming you have to add some stuff into that.
Well, very quickly, I remember the speeches that I would often be presenting to both FCM and provincial people. 60% of public infrastructure is managed responsibility of municipalities. We get less than 10%. So yeah, you're right on the PEI number. But what will happen? What will happen with the responsibilities municipalities are tasked to take care of? Well, some of them will be deferred. They will be neglected. We're going to be impacted by tariffs in a significant kind of way. I resent, and I mentioned earlier about the lack of respect that municipal people receive. And an example of that is the lack of adequate funding and the adequate response to the challenges that we, on behalf of our people, have to undertake and have to take care of. So when the federal government, brags about they're going to do this, they're going to do that. Sure, and they send the messengers down, and eventually, as a point mentioned, originally it was going to be a 50-50 split. Well, by the time the money actually comes out there, the municipal portion is maybe 60-70% of that original 50-50. We need more respect. We need to be given the due, and we need to, the one taxpayer, absolutely. So let's be fair, though, in how we distribute the monies that one taxpayer has. We are not receiving what is our fair share, and municipalities are unable to manage the responsibility. We will have a problem if we don't adjust that.
Okay, I said that was going to turn to my next segment, but I'm going to shorten my next segment by about 5 minutes because I'm cautious of time here. But I have one quick question, quick rapid fire. Are you optimistic that municipalities can be treated fairly in the future? Or do you think that the municipal, provincial, territorial, federal relation is going to be as strained as it is today? You do not have to answer that if you do not want to. And I'm going to sort of open it up. Who wants to take that one first? Quick rapid fire.
I would say, in my experience working with province and working with federal officials as well, there's a desire, and we are encouraged by the comments. Am I hopeful? Not until the provincial and federal people take on and actually complete the funding formulas that are necessary to take on the additional challenges. Public safety, policing costs, what did the federal government do? They shifted it back over to the municipalities. If that doesn't change, we're going to have a problem. Public health here in Manitoba, municipalities are chipping in, paying for doctors, bonusing doctors. If that's not, we're not responsible for healthcare. So you're right, one taxpayer, but we are not being fair, or the governments are not being fair to municipal leaders and municipal people who are doing the very best for the people that they meet every day. Let's have a better deal.
I agree. Marianne, then Jocelyn, then I have one last question for the roundtable because I'm cautious of time and I said an hour and we're almost at the hour mark. So hopefully you guys have an extra 3 minutes for me. So Marianne, then Jocelyn.
So all I was going to add to that is everybody has to be on the same page, and we have to have respectful conversations between all three levels of government. We've got to recognize that if we're going to encourage population growth, whether it be in the Maritimes or in British Columbia, we've got to be able to fund population growth. And we've got to be cognizant, as Ralph said, how it affects municipalities. There's water, wastewater, there's your emergency services, there's roads, there's recreational facilities. There's so much more than just opening up the doors and saying, welcome. There's steps we have to take, but I think all three levels of government have to have that respectful conversation.
Jocelyn.
I think that considering the environment that we all are living in right now, I think the only way Canada could survive is if we have all governments working together, federal, provincial, territorial, municipal, and First Nations. Because, I mean, if I just think about it, renewable energy projects, 20% are First Nations led. So we can't leave the First Nations out of that equation. I think that sure, I also feel that a lot of our governments the way our governments are structured is very siloed. And I think that we need to start working more together on things because there are some redundancies that could be released, but there's also places we can work together so we can share the funding, right? We don't have to, okay, we give you this and you do that. The whole goal should be how can we make our citizens as successful as possible so they can contribute to the highest they can to our tax base. And on top of that, how can we can ensure that Canada can be sustainable so that we are not relying on other powers, other countries to decide how our future is going to look like. And if we don't have all our governments working together, that's not going to happen. Yeah. So I think this is a blessing in disguise in the sense that it is forcing all governments to work together. Who knew there were so many barriers between provinces and trade? There are more barriers between provinces than there were to other countries. But these things are now coming to light and hopefully getting fixed as a result of these challenges that we're being faced today. So I really think, and I'm very hopeful, that we will come to a place where all governments can work together, that the citizens can be supported so that they can live. And even the immigrants, I hear a lot about the immigrants and how there's such a burden on our country and on our taxes. Honestly, if we can bring immigrants in quickly, because we cannot fill if we're going to be doing everything within Canada or most things within Canada, we need workers. And how could we possibly train enough workers to do that? We need to bring them in from outside. The problem is the recognition of foreign credentials, all the hoops they have to jump through in order to work in the profession that they have been educated in, trained in their own country. And when they're working in those professions, then they will contribute, significantly to our tax rate base that will help then bring up our country and meet our needs, right? But we need to be able to efficiently get them to do that so that they can be contributing members to our communities. So I think it's not about putting up barriers, it's about lowering them and about working together cohesively and in a holistic fashion in order to make sure Canada stands strong and independently.
So I want to turn to my last segment, and it's a doozy of a question. Not that I haven't asked a few doozies already, but you have all been the heads of your councils, mayors, Reeves, you've been on council as councillor, and you know that there are people out there who have criticized you and the work that you do and the work that you did while you were on council. There are people who are armchair experts who have openly said that you're doing something wrong or not doing something right. Is it hard not to do that as a former elected officials, seeing what's going on in your community and you want to jump back in and give your advice or open up and tell the current crop of councillors, the current Reeve, the current mayor, the current councillors to say, this is how you should do it. Is it hard not to be an armchair expert at municipal politics when you're a former councillor, former mayor, former Reeve? Ralph, start with you.
I will provide a very short and succinct answer. No, it is not difficult. I very deliberately have not been critical. I've moved out of the area that I used to be the Reeve of. That's helped a great deal. And I think it's a good advice. And I've heard other people mention that, move out. You don't want to be you don't want to feel like you want to be critical. But no, I'm not. They're doing the best they can. Sometimes maybe they could do things differently, but no, I wish them well. I respect the responsibilities that the new group of people have. I do wish them well, and I want them to be successful. And I'm quiet about my criticisms.
Is there a rule in Manitoba? If you're AMM president, you have to leave your municipality once you step down? Because you and Cam Blight both did that. Right after you stepped down, you left your rural municipality. I feel bad for Kathy Valentina, who's about to do the same thing here. But she's not. I should mention that she's not leaving. Marianne, yourself, is it hard not to be an armchair expert when you see things going on that you wish you could do a little bit better, or you feel like you could do a little bit better?
I'm in the same boat as Ralph. No, walked away, stepped away. I as well moved out of the community. So it was a little bit easier. I still follow it. I read every agenda that comes out to keep myself informed. I'm still very vested in a community that I spent many years of my life in. But once I stepped away, I did step away.
I felt I was the weird nerd in the group when I watch all these municipal councils, but you still read the council reports? Okay, that's a
I
little
know,
too
weird.
far. Jocelyn, for yourself, you talked about a little bit earlier, but is it hard to not go back into the weeds and try to see what's going on and give your advice to the councillors? Because it was a really, I believe there was a big turnover in your council this last election, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, actually, we only have two incumbents of the 7 council members that we had. One incumbent is now the mayor, and then the other is another city councilor, but the rest are all new. And, and we're in unprecedented times, right? So, I mean, we are a remote northern community, which is the capital of the territory and home to more than 80% of our population. We have the unique challenges that include, the post-COVID recovery, the geopolitical situation and crisis that Canada is in addition to the infrastructure failures because of climate change and those impacts. And it's all like hitting this new council. Like it's there, right? And it's in their face. And there's not a heck of a lot of experience on that council. So I'm not critical of their decisions or how they're proceeding. I do feel somewhat guilty for not being there.
That's an interesting take. You've had probably people come up to you and ask you for advice about getting into politics, advice about getting out of politics. I want to just ask you about the people who are thinking about getting into municipal politics in 2025, because here in Alberta, in Newfoundland and Labrador, they're heading to municipal elections this year, later on this fall. Some people might be watching this or listening to this saying, why should I get involved municipally? What is the perks of being a municipal elected official in 2025 or in general? Jocelyn?
Perks? It's a life of service. You first of all, you have to have a passion for it. It's not for the faint of heart. There's a lot of serious critical work that needs to be done, and you have to be ready to do the work. So I would say, be prepared, because politics is all consuming. And as we mentioned earlier, don't let your elected role become your identity. Be true to yourself. But at the same time, you also have to, you need to pick your battles. Like you can't win them all. So, I mean, networking, negotiation, compromise, collaboration, those are way more effective in advancing your ideas and decisions than insolence and pretentiousness, antagonism or divisiveness, you know? So that's something that you need to, and it might be surprising when you see how some governments conduct themselves these days, but really this is the better way to go. And also, I would have to say, you know, before you even think about becoming a counselor, get out in your community and volunteer. Volunteer for community organizations, because being around people who aren't necessarily in your social circle, it's going to help you to learn other perspectives on various issues. It'll help you to get to know challenges and other people's ideas. And then you'll be better able to represent and respond to the diversity that is in your community. And that's what makes a good politician. So I think that's really, really important when you want to enter politics, is make sure you're out there and you're meeting people and you're getting to know your community as best you can. And lastly, I would just say, you know, you'll encounter a lot of professional and personal struggles along the way in politics. Be prepared to make those sacrifices, but also prepare your family and your close friends for them, because you will need their support, and don't be afraid to ask for it. That's what I would probably tell a new politician or someone looking to do that.
Awesome. Ralph, now I have had many people on this show who say the worst politician is the one issue candidate politician, because once they get elected, they really don't know what to do afterwards. But you were one of those people. You were one of those one issue candidates. So looking back in your time in office, what advice would you give to a potential new council candidate or a new person who's thinking about putting the name on? Would you tell them to be that one issue candidate because you could last 27 years in office?
I would not advise that. That was I was naive and I didn't understand. Nobody came to us with a real list of this is what you are going to be responsible for. Matter of fact, the comment was made, well, it's only a meeting a month. You know, that kind of, you know, luring people into this often thankless but very interesting kind of responsibility. I would encourage people, if someone approached me, and I have advised individuals to go forward and serve. It's about serving the community. It's such an important responsibility, and we need good people. So if I see good people, or if good people approach me and ask what I think, I would say, absolutely, do it. You can serve the people. Good people make good communities. It's absolutely essential. We need good leaders.
We certainly do. Mary Ann, last word to you before my wrap up.
So I'm just going to follow up on what Jocelyn and Ralph have said. Definitely, if you have one issue, it's going to be a long 4 years for you on council, especially if that issue gets rectified in the first 6 months. People that come to me that say they're intimidated about the thought of sitting on council, I'll ask them what volunteer experience they have, because that's really valuable. And if that doesn't intimidate you, sitting behind a council desk shouldn't either. You've obviously got those people skills to be sitting on a volunteer board. Also, I've had conversations with people that it's okay that you can't please everybody all of the time. It's okay when you make those decisions and people disagree with you, as long as you can back your decision. Also, squeaky wheel doesn't get the grease, and the sooner you learn that, the better, because you're only one voice on council, and it isn't the squeaky wheel that should ever get the grease on council. You represent the community as a whole. And my final word of advice to anybody has always been, become a good listener. And listen to your community, listen to your council members, and provide input. It's valuable. And I guess my closing thought, it would be nice to see more females involved in politics, because I do think they bring a different perspective and a different vision to council, and to make for a very well-rounded council. When I came on council, I served my last term as the only female, and I was the first female mayor in Whitecourt. And I just find it sometimes frustrating that we don't have more females that do sit around the council table.
I agree wholeheartedly. There's a future episode of Municipal Affairs coming out later on this month about that, about getting more females elected in politics. So tune in for that. I know I said that was my last question, but I have a very simple yes or no question. And this is to all three of you. did you enjoy your time on council? Jocelyn?
Absolutely.
Ralph?
Absolutely. Would do it again even.
Loved, I loved almost all of it. Absolutely. I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Marianne?
It was the best job I've ever had in my whole entire life. Being there to help serve the people is such an amazing feeling.
Marianne? Ralph? Jocelyn? I know I said this was going to be an hour, and we're almost at the hour and about 15-minute mark right now. So I do appreciate your time, your energy, your dedication to serving your communities over the tenure that you all had. I feel like we just scratched the surface, and I do appreciate everything you've done for your communities and coming on this show and telling your story and helping the next generation of leaders who might be listening to this. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for being part of the show. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for our panelists who sat down and chatted with us today. It was a pleasure to speak with you about life after municipal politics. Now, if you've gained some valuable insights or enjoyed today's conversation, please be sure to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. To learn more about the communities and the people we feature on this show and our sister shows, be sure to visit us online at crossborderinterviews.ca. Now, our show wouldn't have been possible without your support. So if you can, share this episode with your friends, your family, and yes, even your community. It helps keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll be back with a brand new episode of Municipal Affairs later this week. Till then.